college romance, emotional university love story, and a beautiful student relationship about quiet nerd Matthew and the most beautiful girl on campus, Barbara, who unexpectedly falls in love not with the popular athletes, but with a shy young man whose greatest strength is his mind and heart. This emotional love story is filled with romance, campus life, late-night walks, parties, jealousy, tenderness, and a secret that will finally explain why Barbara chose Matthew over every other guy around her. At a prestigious American university, everyone dreamed about Barbara Kane. Guys lost their minds over her beauty, and girls envied her perfect life. But one day, she approached the quiet nerd Matthew only because she wanted help with school, never imagining that this ordinary-looking boy would completely change her heart forever. He wasn't the strongest, wasn't the most handsome, wasn't rich or popular. His strength was his intelligence. His strength was his soul. Under the warm lights of the campus, between libraries, autumn parks, midnight conversations, and loud college parties, a love story begins that will change both of them forever. And by the end of this story, you'll discover Matthew's greatest secret, the reason why the most beautiful girl at the university stopped looking at money, status, and appearance, and started looking directly into his soul. This story will remind you that real love begins the moment someone sees your heart instead of your image. If you love emotional romance stories, college love stories, and heartfelt relationship dramas, don't forget to subscribe to the channel.
Love Stories Max. Welcome to my channel. Enjoy watching, friends.
The most beautiful girl fell for the quiet nerd, and nobody could understand why. Autumn always arrived beautifully at Westbridge University. The old maple trees across campus burned with shades of red and gold, and the air smelled like coffee, wet leaves, and someone's expensive perfume. Students rushed between buildings, laughed, fell in love, broke hearts, and pretended they knew exactly who they wanted to become in life. Matthew Reynolds never really fit into that beautiful picture. He was the kind of guy people barely noticed. Tall, slightly hunched, skinny. His hair always looked messy, mostly because he constantly ran his fingers through it while studying. He dressed simply: dark sweaters, worn sneakers, an old backpack stuffed with books and notebooks. Nobody ever saw him at the gym or at parties. But whenever professors asked a difficult question and the classroom fell silent, Matthew was always the one who answered. His strength was his mind. He wasn't born rich or handsome. He had simply learned how to work harder than everyone else. While other students went to parties, Matthew stayed in the library until 2 in the morning. While people flirted in coffee shops, he rewrote formulas, built graphs, and read articles that gave everyone else headaches. People knew him as that nerd, and he had long gotten used to being invisible. Then one day, Barbara Kane walked into his life. She was dangerously beautiful. That's exactly how the guys on campus described her. Whenever Barbara walked across campus, people literally turned their heads to stare. She had long, glossy dark hair, perfect posture, a slim waist, legs that looked like they belonged on magazine covers, and that special look in her eyes. A little cold, a little playful. The kind that made most guys lose the ability to speak normally. She knew how to smile in a way that felt like a gift, and guys lost their minds over her. The football team captain brought her coffee. A senator's son bought her expensive gifts. One guy even spelled her name in roses outside the girls' dorm. Barbara was used to attention. She knew she was beautiful, but there was one problem: school. Especially macroeconomics, the brutal class taught by Professor Harris, a dry, ruthless man who failed half the students without a second thought. And Matthew happened to be the best student in the class. "If I fail this paper, I'm dead," Barbara nervously told her friend while sitting in a campus cafe. "Then ask the genius," her friend snorted. "Matthew, he'd probably write a dissertation for you." Barbara smiled slightly. She was used to getting whatever she wanted. The next day, she accidentally sat beside Matthew in the library. He didn't even notice her at first. Matthew sat behind his laptop wearing headphones, typing quickly. Open books with colorful sticky notes were scattered around him. "Hey," Barbara said softly. He looked up and simply nodded. No shock, no nervousness, none of the look she was used to getting. Barbara was actually a little thrown off. "You're Matthew, right?" "Yeah." And he looked back at his laptop. It was almost insulting. "I heard you're really smart. People say a lot of things." She laughed quietly. Any other guy would have already been trying to impress her. But this guy talked to her like she was just another student. "I kind of need help with my paper. I can explain the material." I was hoping for a little more help than that." She leaned closer. Her perfume smelled sweet and expensive. Usually, guys completely melted after that. But Matthew calmly replied, "If you want to learn, I'll help you. If you want me to do everything for you, no." Barbara blinked slowly. For the first time in a very long while, someone had told her no. And strangely enough, it affected her more than the compliments of hundreds of other guys. "Are you always this boring?" She smiled. "Do you always try to get everything through flirting?" This time she laughed for real, and she didn't even understand why. That was how it all started. At first, Barbara came to him just to study. She sat across from him, twirling a pen between her fingers, pretending to listen while mostly watching him instead. Matthew explained difficult topics calmly and patiently. Sometimes he drew diagrams in her notebook. Sometimes he frowned when she got distracted. "Are you even listening?" "I'm trying." "No, you've been staring out the window for 5 minutes." "So you noticed." He sighed heavily, and she smiled. Little by little, Barbara started seeing things nobody else noticed. Matthew was kind, truly kind. One day she saw him helping a janitor carry heavy boxes after class. Another time she watched him stay after a lecture to explain material to a student everyone else called stupid. He never tried to look cool, never humiliated people, and never looked at Barbara like she was some kind of trophy. It shattered the world she was used to. One evening, they stayed in the library until almost closing time. Outside, rain softly poured while the campus glowed beneath yellow streetlights. Barbara sat across from Matthew wearing his dark hoodie, the one he silently gave her because she was cold. "Why do you never try to impress me?" she suddenly asked quietly. Matthew looked up from his book. "Do all the other guys try?" "Constantly." "That sounds exhausting." She stayed silent for a few seconds. "You're weird. I've heard that before." "No," Barbara smiled softly. "You're a good kind of weird." And for the first time in a long while, she truly meant it. Slowly, it stopped mattering how she looked around him. What mattered was what he thought about her. She started actually studying, started staying in the library by herself, stopped skipping lectures. Even her friends were shocked. "You seriously spend evenings with Matthew instead of going to parties?" "So, Barbara, I know exactly what he is." But the problem was, now she no longer knew who she herself was. One afternoon after class, Barbara saw a group of guys making fun of Matthew outside campus. "Hey, professor, maybe you should go to a party sometime instead of marrying your books." They burst out laughing. Matthew, as usual, pretended not to hear them. But Barbara suddenly felt something painful twist inside her chest. "Shut up," she said coldly. The guys immediately went quiet. "Barbara, I said shut up." Matthew looked at her in surprise. And for the first time, she realized that when he got hurt, it hurt her too. That evening, they walked silently across campus for a long time. "You didn't have to do that," Matthew finally said. "Yes, I did." "Why?" Barbara stopped walking. The wind softly moved her hair while her eyes shimmered beneath the campus lights. "Because you're the only guy here who ever looked at me like I was more than just a pretty picture." Matthew stayed silent. "And I hated you for it at first?" She laughed quietly. "Then I realized that's exactly why I can't stop thinking about you." At that moment, his heart was beating so hard he could almost physically feel it. "Barbara." "No, let me finish. My whole life, guys wanted to have me. But you were the first one who wanted to understand me." She stepped closer. "And honestly, that's terrifying." Matthew looked at her carefully, almost like he was afraid of ruining the moment. "I don't know how to be like the other guys," he said quietly. "Thank God." And it was Barbara who kissed him first. Softly, slowly, like for the very first time in her life. She wasn't kissing the guy everyone admired. She was kissing the man her heart had chosen. And in that moment, Matthew realized something. Sometimes intelligence can conquer what money, looks, and status never could. Because Barbara didn't fall in love with the strongest guy at the university. She fell in love with the one who saw her as a person. Matthew and Barbara's relationship didn't grow the way most college relationships did at Westbridge University. There were no loud arguments, toxic games, or endless social media photos. They didn't try to prove to the world that they were in love. They simply were. Quietly, genuinely. Matthew and Barbara could spend hours walking through the campus parks beneath old streetlights and golden autumn trees. They bought cheap coffee from the small cafe near the library, sat on benches by the lake, and talked about everything in the world. Their fears, their childhoods, their future, the people they wanted to become. For the first time in her life, Barbara felt like a guy was looking into her soul instead of at her body. And for the first time in his life, Matthew felt loved not for his grades or usefulness, but simply for being himself. Their love grew slowly, softly, almost unnoticed by everyone around them. But one evening, everything changed. Barbara's friend Selena was throwing a huge party at her parents' mansion outside the city. Her father owned a massive construction company, and the house looked more like a luxury movie villa than a normal home. "Please come with me," Barbara begged with a smile while sitting beside Matthew on the campus steps. "Barbara, you know I hate parties, which is exactly why you need to relax for once. The football guys will be there. So, they don't like me." Barbara smiled softly and took his hand. "But I love you." Matthew sighed heavily and lost the argument. By the time they arrived, the party was already wild. The enormous modern mansion glowed with warm lights. Loud music blasted around the pool while colorful reflections danced across the water. Students laughed, danced, and jumped into the pool fully dressed. Some people grilled burgers on the terrace while others lounged in deck chairs holding beer bottles. The air smelled like expensive perfume, alcohol, warm night air, and youth. Barbara looked absolutely breathtaking. She wore a short black dress that perfectly hugged her figure, delicate gold earrings, and soft wavy hair falling over her shoulders. The moment they walked into the backyard, several guys literally stopped talking to stare at her. Then they noticed Matthew beside her, and immediately started smirking. "Seriously?" One football player laughed quietly. "Barbara showed up with the professor? Careful, guys. He's probably gonna make us write essays." They burst into laughter. Matthew instantly tensed. He was already thinking about telling Barbara he should probably just go home. But suddenly she looked at him so tenderly, like nobody else around them even existed. And before anyone could say another word, Barbara walked up to Matthew, placed her hands gently on his cheeks, and kissed him, softly, slowly, beautifully, like she wasn't kissing just a guy, but someone she truly loved. The backyard fell silent. Even the music suddenly felt far away. The football players stood there completely stunned. Some of them literally looked like their jaws had dropped. Because Barbara Kane, the girl almost every guy at the university dreamed about, was only looking at one person. The skinny nerd in the dark sweater. And there was so much love in her eyes that nobody could fake something like that. When the kiss ended, Barbara gently rested her forehead against his and smiled softly. Then she looked at everyone around them and said loudly enough for the entire party to hear, "This is the best man I've ever met." The silence became even heavier. Someone laughed nervously. Someone looked away. And Matthew stared at her like the entire world had stopped existing in that moment. Because for the first time in his life, he wasn't chosen last. He was chosen above everyone else. After that party at Westbridge University, something changed. Not loudly, not dramatically, but permanently. People started looking at Matthew differently. The same quiet nerd in the dark sweater, the guy football players used to joke about, suddenly became someone people respected. Nobody could understand one thing, How this completely ordinary guy managed to make Barbara Kane fall in love with him, the most beautiful girl at the university. And it wasn't just because they were together. It was the way Barbara looked at him, like he was her peace, her home, her person. After that night, Matthew stopped lowering his eyes when he walked into classrooms or across campus. He didn't become arrogant or cocky, not at all. But something inside him changed. Confidence. Because when someone truly loves you, it changes you. Especially someone like Matthew. Their relationship grew even deeper. Now they did more than study together or walk through campus at night. They lived for each other. Barbara started waiting for every one of his smiles. Matthew stopped being afraid to hold her hand in public. They fell asleep on tiny apartment couches while movies played in the background, argued about books, ate cheap pizza at midnight, laughed over stupid little things, and kissed beneath warm rain after classes. And most importantly, around Matthew, Barbara no longer felt the need to be perfect. She could finally be real, without a mask, without pretending, without the constant fear that people only loved her for her beauty. And beside Barbara, Matthew stopped feeling not enough, not weak, not invisible. She looked at him like he was a man capable of changing the world. And little by little, he started believing it too. The years passed. Matthew became more confident, more ambitious, stronger inside. Professors spoke about him as a future star in economics. Big companies offered him internships. His research started gaining attention. And the same people who once laughed at him now shook his hand with respect. But none of that was the most important thing. The most important thing was that every evening, Barbara was still beside him. The girl who once wanted to use him to write a paper for her now loved him so deeply that sometimes she looked at him with tears of happiness in her eyes. And then came graduation night. The ballroom glowed with golden light. Slow music filled the air while students laughed, took pictures, hugged each other, and said goodbye to their college years. But Matthew barely noticed anyone else, because Barbara was there. She stood in front of him wearing a long dark blue dress, unbelievably beautiful. But now her beauty meant something far greater to him than appearance alone. He knew her soul, her fears, her tenderness, her heart. Matthew gently placed his hand on her waist, and they began to dance. Slowly, calmly, as if nobody else in the room existed. Barbara rested her cheek against him and smiled softly. "Do you remember the first time we met in the library?" Matthew laughed quietly. "You wanted me to write your paper, and you didn't even notice how beautiful I was." He looked into her eyes. "No, I noticed." "Then why were you different from all the other guys?" Matthew stayed silent for a few seconds. Then he answered quietly, "Because I was afraid of falling in love with a girl who would never look into my soul." Barbara's lips trembled slightly. She wrapped her arms around him tighter. And in that moment, both of them finally understood the real secret behind their love. Matthew didn't make Barbara fall in love with him through money, or muscles, or popularity. He made her fall in love because around him, she felt like a person instead of a beautiful object. He listened to her, understood her, saw the real her. Sometimes people spend their whole lives searching for someone beautiful, and then suddenly realize the most valuable person is the one around whom you can truly be yourself. Because beauty fades, money comes and goes, status changes, but a person's soul remains. And maybe that's why quiet little Matthew Reynolds defeated every handsome, strong, popular guy around him. Because Barbara didn't fall in love with a perfect image. She fell in love with the person who taught her that real love is when someone sees you with their heart.